literally, we peeled the plastic off the chairs and we looked around and we were like, oh, and we knew it. We knew it before we even opened the doors.
Meet Sarah Gavigan, the founder of Otaku Ramen. She's opening up about the mistakes that almost ended her business and what it really takes to make the most addictive bowl of ramen.
Umami is a neurological response. It happens when you have 2 or more amino acids stacked in one bite. Chicken has 1 amino acid, beef has 1 amino acid, Parmesan has 4 amino acids. Stack those amino acids, more umami. It literally makes you happy. This is why you can't stop eating a bag of Doritos.
Okay.
Anybody that ever comes to me and asks me for advice, survive 3 years as a pop-up, and if you can do that, sign a lease. Don't sign a lease unless you can.
What's a mistake that you made where your ego wanted to defend it, but the business demanded that you admit it fast?
When you spend over $1 million to build a location and that location is not successful, you unfortunately have to make a very quick decision to get out. That was really, really hard, and I did not F up fast enough there.
Sarah Gavigan, welcome to the Restaurant Reset. We're excited to have you. You know, the folks who listen to this kind of span the spectrum, everything from really, small operators, people just thinking about starting up restaurants, all the way up to, people who work at large enterprise chains. And I was really excited to have you on because you represent a really critical demographic and someone who has a lot of good insight, I think, from your history for those operators who are actually in the trenches, thinking about starting a business, in the middle of starting a business, have started a business, and are starting to experience those challenges. You're someone who went through that and really kind of embodies a lot of what that restaurant reset is that the show's about. And so I wanted to start with a little bit, the big opening question is you open your Nashville shop in 2015, right?
Mm-hmm. That's correct.
And, then you expanded into a bunch more units. And then you intentionally closed some of those units so you could really kind of double down and fortify on that because there's a lot of different external pressures. And we can get into all the various ways that comes to your business. But if you could rewind to 2010, right, knowing what you know now about the boom of a good town like Nashville, right, the hype cycle that comes with that, operational reality of ramen, you're in ramen, which is one of my favorite foods of all time. Would you still build Otaku in Nashville? And what would you do differently for the first 5 years so that you didn't have to learn it expensive, as you've said later?
Yeah, I mean, the first 5 years were absolutely glorious. It was really like such a quick climb because the market was so wide open and everyone was literally and figuratively so hungry. And nothing had been done here, right? So wide open field. And I am really more the kind of operator that after 20 years of working in entertainment and music and film and advertising, I have really good pattern recognition and I can see down the pike. And as a person who was coming from a very a historical creative community of Hollywood into Nashville, which was a growing creative community, the first 5 years was just a big back patting ceremony. And everybody was like, everything is so great, And after year 5 and like right before COVID hit, we started to really see I started to see wait, talking to my real estate agent, for example, I'm like, I'm sorry, you did how many deals? And then it started I started getting all the phone calls from every private equity firm in the country that was looking for a brand to expand. And I bought it. They fluffed me. I bought it, hook, line, and sinker. And that was the only mistake I think I made.
Okay.
I think that I was in the right place at the right time with the right product. I'm certainly not the face of what you would think a ramen brand would be. That in itself, I think, is really fascinating to people. I often say that the way that I kind of feel like people see me is like, if I was like a news announcer, it would be like, white middle-aged housewife makes ramen, news at 11. Yeah. And so I also wasn't 25 years old when I started this. I was 40.
Yeah. Okay.
And so I already had some battle scars. I had already built and sold 2 businesses, and I had already walked away from another business. So I think I kind of saw everything before everybody else, not everybody maybe, but before the people around me saw it. I just my ego blinded me.
Okay.
And I took the bait that this brand was big enough and the demand was big enough for me to expand in my hometown. What I would have done differently is gone to Charlotte.
Oh, really? Okay.
I would have gone to Raleigh. I would have gone to Huntsville. I would have gone, and I think that like
Compared to Nashville, because Nashville, I mean, is
well, no,
it?
no, not like I wouldn't have opened more units in Nashville.
Oh, within the town.
I would not have expanded in Nashville. I would have expanded outside of Nashville.
Okay.
That was the critical mistake that I made.
Right. So one otaku would just kill it in Nashville, but 7 would be a disaster, right?
Yeah, I mean, there are still a lot of people here that don't even know what ramen is. They call it spaghetti, I mean,
Maybe noodle.
yeah. And that's okay. But like it's not a hamburger. It's not barbecue. It's different. And Nashville's changed a lot. And we don't have a lot of traditional Asian culture here. So that I think people were just so excited and so hungry. But now all the big boys have moved in with their
Hmm.
war chests of money. And that I think like what's happening in Nashville is unsustainable. And we can get into that.
Yeah, that's probably a whole other podcast, but I agree.
Hmm. But I think by and large, my critical mistake was expanding within Nashville and not taking that first step outside of Nashville. And the other thing that I think was a critical mistake is not trusting myself with that step. And, I can hear my father, like my dad's like an engineer, very smart guy, like hear him in my head going, don't hire consultants. They don't know. They don't know any more than you do. He's kind of right about that. And I'm also like, it's very lonely when you're a founder, right? And you're just trying
Hmm.
to do all these things and all this stuff is happening. And you're like, this is my shot. I got to take it. And you're going. And you just need someone to talk to. You need someone to lay these ideas on to tell you, like, am I crazy? Is this dumb? Am I right? Should I do this? I'm also like a very good soldier. You tell me what to do and I will do it if I trust you.
Yeah.
I listened to that consultant a little too well.
Yeah, I got you. Because sometimes consultants will just echo back to you what you say and then charge you a bunch of money to listen to it.
Or they made their millions before the market tanked and they never had to survive market adjustments.
Yes.
And they cashed out. So like, how are our situations the same? How?
Yeah. I would say, so do you think like you're the mentor you'd be looking for would have been just another operator, another restaurateur who's kind of been in the same trenches as you?
Man, I don't know. I think that like the obsession with development that our country has, the sheer greed and obsession with it is what I grapple with every day. And I grapple with it because I bought into it. And I really I think if I could like ask the universe for anything, I would have asked for an operating partner, not a consultant.
Mm.
Someone that had the mileage and the experience that could take my brand to the next level. Asking a founder to be the one to make that step happen, I think is one of the critical things that's wrong with our system. Like you have to get to 15 units before you can get backing and help. And like all of that feels very broken to me. When brands really need help the most is between 2 and 3 units.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And that's where you need critical infrastructure, right? And that if you can find an operating partner that has the experience to help you expand into that, I think it's far better than what's available to operators now that are trying to hit 20% store level EBITDA $1,500 in sales per square foot, all those markers that
Right.
those private equity guys give you, right?
Yeah.
And you're just like gunning it to get to make those numbers happen. And they're also going, well, it's okay if you lose money at this point. No, it's actually not because it's my money.
Yeah, that's right.
And
Yeah.
so you're just like, how on earth can anyone accomplish this? And you're looking around at these other brands and you're like, how did a deli get $150 million? Like, it's just inexplicable how it all works. And once I got into it and I started having those conversations, again, I'm a good soldier and like, I will go. But then I started realizing like something is rotten here. Really, really rotten.
Being someone who got into this business to make ramen, do you ever find that it's helpful when you're in these moments that you're just talking about all these, financial metrics in the business? We can get into that for a second, but is it helpful to remind yourself why you wanted to make ramen? Like, how did you get through that and not lose your soul? And maybe you did feel like you lost it for a little bit, but talk to me about kind of fighting the tension. Like, why did you want to make ramen? Why did you go into that specific business? And how did you fight to kind of keep that soul alive?
I'm definitely very left brain, right brain. So I love a P&L as much as I love breaking down a recipe.
Oh, that's good.
But I'm not classically trained. I had never worked a day in a restaurant before I opened my own restaurant. Could I have been more foolish, right?
Oh, wow.
And so I really saw this as like a gift to my community. That's why I wanted to do it. I mean, I had a transformative experience living in Los Angeles. I mean, I'm from Columbia, Tennessee. I'm from 50 miles south of Nashville. I'm from, the place where the Civil War happened, and I grew up 45 minutes away from where the KKK was founded. So by the time I got to Los Angeles, it was like, holy shit. All of these cultures, I can just like go visit any country in the world in 20 minutes. And then I
Right.
had Jonathan Gold telling me where to go. I was in absolute heaven. And he wrote a piece about Sentuka, which is the first ramen chain that came over from Japan to the United States that is in the Mitsuwa Japanese grocery stores. And I went in one day finally after having like a really crap day at work. That happens a lot when you work in entertainment. And my work was dismissed in 15 seconds. And I was like, ugh. So I went and I had a bowl of ramen. And it's not like I had never been in an Asian food court before, but
Sure.
something was different about this moment where I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. I have no idea how to eat a bowl of ramen. I'm just going to kind of look around and see what everybody else is doing. I'm going to take my glasses off. I'm going to put my face in that bowl. Okay, noodles first. And then when I came up from that bowl, I was like, okay, I feel better. Why do I feel better? And then I kind of kept coming back to that moment and it became my respite. Like ramen, I didn't understand until a lot later what was actually happening, which was umami and it's neurological. Actually, umami makes you happy.
Yep.
And then that just kind of took off for me. So when my husband and I decided that we were going to leave LA and come back to Nashville, or back for me at least, I was raising this feral child. I am back in the conservative mindset that I so desperately left when I was 13 years old. I went away to school to get away from it. And I was a hot mess. I was like, how am I going to do this? This is not where I belong. And so I just started making ramen. I had no idea what I was doing, but I knew how to make things happen. And film production taught me how to figure anything out. Film sets and restaurants are not all that different.
Yeah, you got to figure it out. Yeah.
Figure it out.
Make the magic happen.
Yeah, so it's like structured creativity, right?
Yeah.
There's names, there's a language, there's all these different things. And so that's really kind of how it started. And like in the early days of Nashville, where like literally nothing had been done, I just started doing pop-ups. Pop-ups were great for me because coming from film production, I was like, no sweat. I got this. And then all these cooks showed up, these like really talented cooks would show up to help me. I didn't know shit from Shinola. I mean, I didn't know anything about health code. I didn't know anything about anything.
Yeah.
And I just was in the right place at the right time with a lot of other kids that were super hungry to learn. And we just all had passion, and they all helped me get where I was trying to go. I've had a handful of extremely talented sous chefs and young chefs that have helped me fill the gap where my education was missing. So, I give myself the title chef because that's what I'm supposed to do, but I don't really feel like that.
Mm.
I feel more like a person who had an idea that wanted to share that idea, that is very good at building brands. And I just fell in love with Japanese food and culture. It's the rabbit hole that I fell into.
That's great. You mentioned pop-ups. Actually, that's kind of one of the next things I wanted to go to, because you launched Otaku South as a pop-up in 2012, and it was after running into Burger Up's owner at an event, kind of inspired you to do that. What did you learn from pop-ups that you could never have learned by jumping straight into like a lease on a brick and mortar building?
Yeah, anybody that ever comes to me and asks me for advice, that is my number one piece of advice. Survive 3 years as a pop-up, and if you can do that, sign a lease. But don't sign a lease unless you can. And that, I think, especially today with out of control development costs,
Yeah.
that, really it was the place where I got to learn. Like, I had never worked a day in a restaurant. Yeah. So, I mean, if I'm to go back to my very first pop-up, I would never eat that bowl of ramen. Ever, ever eat that
Why?
bowl. It was not that great. I didn't know anything yet.
Okay.
I didn't know. There were so many things I didn't know. It's crazy. And so I think that like learning on the job is really important, but you're also given the grace of like, you're not judged as cruelly as if you are a brick and mortar. And I think that judgment is a really hard thing when you're creative. And, being judged in public is very, very difficult. It's one of the hardest things for chefs is that feeling of judgment of like, this isn't good. I didn't like this. Or being a white person, a white woman making Asian food. There are a lot of people that don't like that. But I got to make my mistakes and learn in a safe environment while also learning exactly how it all worked. I mean, I didn't even know what a Canberra was. Like, you know? So I think that it's so exciting when you have an idea and you're so passionate about it that you're like, I know that I can do this. And that passion is critical, mission critical
Yeah.
to actually getting a restaurant off the ground. But there are inexplicable, stop gaps to this business. And number one is cash. And and also I think the thing that's the most important here, I built a brand in those 3 years.
Okay.
And that brand is what launched a restaurant. I
Okay.
did not start from scratch. From day one, we were profitable because we were a brand already.
Yeah.
So those 3 years were as much an exercise in me learning the craft and learning how to break it down and serve it in a restaurant environment, right? It's different. And number two was that I built the brand.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting that you focus on the brand. Sometimes I feel like people can spend too much time on the brand and
Sure.
neglect the product. But I also think it's really important to realize that, people are coming into your shop because they're intrigued by something they see. No one eats your food first and then decides to go in your shop. It's always the reverse. And so there is something to making sure your brand is presentable, interesting, aesthetically pleasing in some way, because we all judge the books by their cover as much as we would like to say we don't. Unless, of course, word of mouth is always really powerful.
Sure.
But something starts at a brand level. And it's interesting that you point that out. Did you go through, because pop-ups really kind of help you test your ideas. Did you have any iterations of your brand or your food that you went through during that process that you found went well and then maybe didn't go well?
Yeah, I mean, Otaku South was the first name. And, probably a lot of people on the other side of the screen are thinking, why did she name it Otaku? Otaku, literally translated, means at home. And it became a derogatory term in Japan to describe people that did nothing but stay at home and play video games. And then it became the largest subculture in the world. And I read it in a book, and it was in reference to obsession. So when the term made its way to the United States, it kind of meant more like I'm obsessed. I'm obsessed with anime. I'm obsessed with Japanese pop culture. And so for me, that was super fitting. Oh my God, I'm totally obsessed. Yes. And I was in the South. So that's kind of how that happened. But then when we realized, okay, we've really got something on our hands here. We're going to be Otaku Ramen. And I come from a brand background. I worked in global advertising. And so not every restaurant is a brand and not every brand is a restaurant. And I don't think that what the exercise that I went through is right for every restaurant. And did I think that I was going to have multiple units when I started this? No,
Yeah, okay. That was going to be one of my questions.
I did not know that. But the 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 stickiness of the word otaku because of anime and because of the growth of that subculture in the United States, we got to ride sidecar. You know, Netflix was making announcements that they were laying down billions of dollars in anime, and we just got to ride sidecar on that.
Yeah.
And that honestly was a huge deal for us because one of my favorite things about like being a part of this brand is seeing young people come in with like their anime shirts on, bringing their parents. Like they want their parents to have the experience. Maybe they've never even had a bowl of ramen. Like
Right.
I had a I was in the shop one day, I think it was like in the first 3 years, and someone was like, "Hey, Sarah, there's a dad here with his daughter that wants to say hello to you." And I go over, and this girl is like 12, and she's got on her anime shirt, and they have driven all the way from Knoxville. They've driven 3 hours for her to come have her first bowl of ramen.
Yeah, because they didn't have any proper ramen in Knoxville, I'm assuming. Yeah.
And so that really became an emotional thing. Like it's emotional. And so I feel that the definition of the term brand in this way, in this execution, is kind of controlled emotions around what it is that you're doing. And it's not just fonts and colors, and it's an emotion. And I always say that ramen is emotional in a way that a hamburger and a taco could never be.
Interesting. What is it about ramen that makes it different emotionally from a hamburger or a taco? Because I will say, I do feel emotional when I eat a good taco or a good burger. I feel what you're saying though when I've had good ramen. Like there's something. It's that like you mentioned umami, right? There's something to that. Break that down for me.
Yeah. So this was actually discovered by a neuroscientist here at Vanderbilt who came and sat in front of me at the ramen shop one day and told me about his research. So umami is a neurological response.
Okay.
And it happens when you have 2 or more amino acids stacked in one bite. Chicken has 1 amino acid, beef has 1 amino acid, pork, Parmesan has 4 amino acids, tomato has 2. Stack those amino acids, more umami.
Mm-hmm.
When umami hits the palate, it signals the brain to let serotonin and dopamine out. It literally makes you happy. So this is why you can't stop eating a bag of Doritos.
Okay.
Umami. And I always say that like MSG is the nuclear superpower of umami. If used responsibly, it's a great source of energy. And but umami is the key factor here. The craveability, the I need to have this once a week, or I don't even know if I love the taste so much. It just made me feel better. Like it's more than just taste. That's the difference, is that it's doing something. Now, a taco can have umami, a burger can have umami, but it's not how they approach the recipe or the food. It's not how they decide how that food is going to be either presented or eaten or how you're going to feel. When you learn Japanese food, and especially when you learn ramen, that is programmed into you from day one. Your only job is to create umami. That's your job. And that umami, if executed correctly, scientifically creates happiness.
I love that. That's great. I, when you're mentioning that, right? There is kind of a bit of a school, especially with something as traditional and historic as ramen is in Japanese culture. And I'm sure that you, as you mentioned, did not do everything, right the first time or the second time or the seventh time. But you've said is kind of like a motto of yours is that you've just said F up fast, right?
Number one rule.
And you've tied that to like your ego. And, because people get so emotional about ramen and they notice like little changes people will pick up on. When you realize that something is wrong, food, service, the vibe of everything, maybe even like, the numbers of your business, what is your 48-hour playbook? How do you quickly diagnose that and fix it before it becomes kind of a reputation problem?
Yeah, I've come into a couple of moments like that in my career. I am typically pretty surgical, and it's the Virgo in me. I can hit it hard. But when you spend over $1 million to build a location and that location is not successful, you unfortunately have to make a very quick decision to get out. And that happened to us. That was really, really hard. And I did not F up fast enough there. And that, I think, that's on the biggest scale, right? Let's talk about it on a smaller scale. On a small scale, it could be like, I had to solve a science problem with one ingredient. When you put soy sauce in the refrigerator, the water molecules separate. It changes the taste. In America, we have to put it in the refrigerator. Not in Japan. You never put it in the refrigerator in Japan. So these are like little problems that you have to solve. Lucky for me, because I am so reactive and so emotional, and that's what makes me good at my job. I have an operating partner who does his very best to stop all of that from hitting the public and lets me have my fits in private so that I can work things out. But naturally, I am the kind of person, after working in Hollywood and, being trained basically to like have the sharpest fangs in the room, draw blood first. That's what they taught me, is that I understood very quickly that I have the power, not the vendor, not the person that is the employee, but you have to be very responsible with that power, and you have to be surgical with that power. And if you have to make a decision that is being held back by your ego, then you have to make that decision fast.
Interesting. Yeah.
Your ego is the check.
Yeah, and I think that the challenge is that in those moments where we most need it is the moments that we're most likely to be blinded by it. And you've said in previously that you felt more vulnerable when you can't blame anyone but yourself. So, what's a mistake that you made where your ego wanted to defend it, but the business demanded that you admit it fast? Talk to us about your experience there.
Yeah. When I wanted to open a ramen shop in my neighborhood, East Nashville, and it just did not, it was too big. It was in the wrong location. It didn't feel like the original. It felt corporate-y. Like all of those things were things that as we were going through the process felt right. And then literally we peeled the plastic off the chairs and we looked around and we were like, oh, fuck. And we knew it. We knew it before we even opened the doors that it wasn't going to work.
That it just didn't feel right?
Mm-mm.
And did you feel like there was a way that you could fix it at all? Or it was just like, this is not going to work?
It was just wrong. That's the only thing I can say is it was just wrong. And then you're caught in this emotional wave of trying to make it right, and you're making it more wrong by trying to make it right. And so I put myself in a hole, and then my defense of that mistake dug me a deeper and deeper and deeper hole within my community, because I went into fighting mode.
Mm-hmm.
And my fangs came out, and people started criticizing, and I started reacting. And that was a very bad place to be.
I mean, I don't mean to make us sit in that bad place more, but I think a lot of people can find themselves there. What was the point that broke you to realize, oh, I'm actually wrong here and I need to change? Get us to that spot.
Yeah, there's like a local community food magazine here that I think everybody, I won't say the name, but everybody kind of has that version in their hometown.
That type of thing. Yep.
And it's a syndicate, and they don't do food reviews, but she decided that she was so upset that she was going to post a really, really nasty, nasty review of me and of my business and of this location.
And that was the moment that you said, okay, something has to change.
That was the moment that I started fighting. And then when I realized that my fight was only going to make it worse, I had to completely surrender. Completely surrender. And that is not something that I am familiar with. That almost broke me in half. It was the hardest thing I've ever had to go through in my life.
When something like that happens, it can be a refining fire, though, right? It can be something that makes you stronger for the next time. How have you seen going through that? Because in that moment, you probably felt like this is never going to get better ever.
My world is over. They hate me.
You're still here rocking and rolling. If you could talk to somebody who's in that place, fighting in that rock bottom spot, now that you're on the other side, what advice would you have for that person, and what words of encouragement would you have?
Get used to sitting in it. Just get used to it. It is like, I think one of the things that, very rarely do you meet people that are in the public eye in any way that, you're like, that is an amazing person, right? Like usually people that are in the public eye are not who they are when you meet them in person, right? So anytime I meet someone that is in the public eye that I feel is like, wow, they are so grounded. How do they do it? I started to just kind of lean on some people that I had met through the years and say, I am in the deepest, darkest hole. How do I manage this? And it was, you know, a couple of people that I had been lucky enough to interface with through my career that I approached that are, on the highest level in this industry that have incurred, you know, hundreds of thousands of negative reviews that helped me to understand that it wasn't about them, it was about me. That's the only thing I can control is me. And you have to have a certain amount of ego to do this. So where does the healthy ego begin and the unhealthy ego end? Like where does that begin and end? And when you run a company and you're the public face of a company, it is a constant exercise in that. You never get to the top of that mountain. It is a constant exercise. You're human, right? And
Yeah.
you put it all out there in a bowl your entire life. My entire life's work now is Otaku Ramen. So even now, if I see a negative review, it's still like,
You're basically just saying that you might as well just be telling me I'm a horrible person and I should just stop.
Yeah, but you gotta learn to sit in it. And that was my lesson, was in my F up fast on our East Nashville location. That moment for me was like truly, truly defining. Like who am I going to be in this moment? And I was not proud of the person that I was. So that I think is really hard for people to say, but like, I don't know how much longer I can even be in this industry in Nashville with the way things are going. So I'm going to leave it all on the table.
That's great. I, you know, thank you for that vulnerability, because I think some people just really take a bunch of time, don't talk about it, don't talk about how it feels, and they bottle it up till they explode. And I'm sure it's cathartic for some of the folks listening to hear you in that state. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I think it's important.
So in ramen school, kind of going back to this whole, ramen is an emotional thing, a big thing for people when
Yeah.
you really like ramen and really know ramen. You stated directly, ramen is not a recipe, it's a cuisine. How does that philosophy change the way you train cooks and maintain consistency across locations, especially when, turnover is real, right? I mean, in the restaurant industry in general, labor is a massive challenge that is not getting better. And, it's hard to find good people to, work at your business, let alone something as high end and challenging as ramen. How do you I mean, it's hard enough to like find people who will, make good burgers on their own, right? Like, how do you do that? How do you train cooks? How do you build that, ethos of it's a cuisine and into the people that you're bringing into your restaurant?
So ramen has levels. There's, volume shops, and there's what they call kodawari shops, artisanal ramen.
Mhm.
And, when we started, I would consider myself to be artisanal, but we were pumping out 500 bowls a day. So it quickly became clear that we were going to have to build a menu and stick to that menu. Menu couldn't change. And I also it serves us for what we do in many, many ways, because I always said that ramen is a lot like barbecue. It's habitual. You love what you eat the most. Like living in a city like Los Angeles, where there are hundreds of ramen shops, right?
Can't throw a rock without hitting a ramen shop.
Right. And that's where ramen came first into the United States, was Los Angeles. And so that, I think, you could sit and argue with people all day long about which ramen shop is the best. The best is the one that you eat the most. That's how umami works. And so this is where my expertise came in really, really handy: systems and breaking things down. And ramen is very systematic. And that makes it very easy to teach to people because it is very broken down. You have one product and it goes in 4 stages. And so I think that, and I owned other kinds of restaurants, and I struggled with how to train cooks while kind of keeping a rotational menu going. I was not trained to do that. I couldn't do it. And in ramen is so systematic that it really allows us, and this was actually one of the great outcomes of our attempted expansion, was that I built a completely new supply chain, and I learned it from absolute beginning to end. And we had a commissary for a really long time. That was really kind of my first kitchen, was this really crazy, weird, like, it's a building that's still there down the street, and another guy's taken over the kitchen, but it was literally like the administrative building to an old veterans hospital.
Oh, yeah, very stylish.
And this was a kitchen that somebody had built on like the second floor of this weird ass mini mall. And literally everything in this kitchen had fallen off the back of a truck, for real. The hoods were like a child welded them. I mean, the grates were welded in. I mean, it was absolutely bonkers. But if I hadn't have had that kitchen to learn and play in on a large scale, it was a 5,000 square foot kitchen.
That's a big
I
kitchen.
never would have been able to figure this out. If I had had to do all of that work in a tiny postage stamp of a kitchen, I'm not sure I would have ever been able to work it out. That kitchen saved my career, really, and like my ability. Does that make sense? Like,
yeah, absolutely.
How it was because ramen is big, right? Like stock, you just start there. That is like, I always say the number one thing that I say to any cook that I train: this is simple, but it's not easy.
Yeah.
And this game is won and lost in a quarter millimeter. Because if you've got 12 ounces of stock and 1 ounce of seasoning, because there's no seasoning in the stock is blank, and you make a small mistake, whole bowl's off. If the water is not at a hard rolling boil when those noodles hit the water, because they cook 90% of the way in the first 10 seconds, it's wrong.
Yeah.
These are simple things, right? They're not complex. My job is to take the complex things and make them simple. So that was where I really shined in a kitchen. I shined in the science of the recipes and of how to systematize a kitchen so that anybody from any line in any kitchen in America could step into my kitchen and figure it out.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. I think a lot of people, sometimes it is just about, you get so you see the forest for the trees and you need to break it down to see the trees. And in some cases, I think that's really good. A little change, another change you made that I'm curious to hear your thoughts about. You went from partnering with Sun Noodle, right?
Mhm.
Even FedExing broth samples early on, to making your own noodles in house and launching Super Happy Noodle LLC with
Mhm.
like you made a major equipment investment. And
I
so,
did.
what does it like? When does it make sense for a restaurant to bring production in house? And then when is it a distraction? Because people think about that kind of thing all the time. Walk us through your experience there.
Yeah, that was a very big F up fast moment too. And that was also a suggestion from a consultant that I was like, okay, we'll make our own noodles. But what I did not consider was that my customer didn't want that. My customer wanted what they had already had for 7 years.
Interesting.
Yeah, it wasn't about better. It was about same. That was the lesson learned there. So I think that when you're in this game, you're always trying to, in the ramen game, like get closer and closer to Kodawari, get closer and closer to this idea of like everything made in-house from scratch, the way that it's done in these extraordinary ramen shops in Japan. And I had an employee that was extremely talented when it came to noodle making. And um, I wanted to give him a shot at running a company. He was not ready.
Okay.
And so from like a point of view of like literal logistics, um, ramen is made from flour that is more finely milled than even Dopo Zero. Because of the hydration level of a ramen noodle is about 20 to 40%, depending on the noodle, below pasta. So in order to make ramen, you have to have machines that are lots of pressure.
Really press it.
So
Yeah.
you imagine that from a science point of view, that flour is so fine and you have so little hydration, right? That fineness of that flour is very important. There is only one mill in all of North America that will do that. And they are contracted to Sun Noodle. So even if I wanted to make my own noodles, I would still be buying my kansui and my flour from Sun Noodle. So what's the point? Why not just let the pros do what the pros do? So, it was a failed experiment. I think that, there are other ramen shops that do it really successfully. It just didn't work for us. The message here is that sometimes as a chef and a restaurateur, you're like, I have to make it better. If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah. That's really good advice. Because you know everyone hears about the success stories for the most part, and they don't get to hear from people who might have regretted their decision or wish they'd done something different. And I love that you're willing to share that with us so that the next people who are doing this don't make that same mistake. To that end, I think let's leave it on this. I want to leave folks with um you know the next generation of founders of a restaurant. They might be even listening right now. And they want to open in some new hot city, right? That's up and coming. Think at Nashville 2015, right?
Mhm.
Y- What's your advice on timing and where to plant your flag so that when that boom is happening, it doesn't chew you up on the back end?
It's impossible to see until you're in it, until you're in the soup, right? But, you know, it's Nashville has experienced a growth trajectory that is unhealthy, extremely unhealthy. And that's not political. Has nothing to do with that. I think if you're going to if you're going to open a restaurant in a city, understand how that city works.
Okay.
How do they make their money? What is the financial pathway in which that metro organization is going to tax you, is going to pay their bills, and what is your bill to them? I wish I had understood that a little bit more when I started this, because now we're in a situation in Nashville where valuations are so overrated. This is the irony. So many people have moved here from California because they don't want to pay the taxes and because real estate is overvalued. And where did they move?
Yeah.
To Nashville, where now we have overvalued real estate and too high taxes.
Yeah. As someone who moved from, Southern California to Charlotte, North Carolina, I also have now experienced that same thing, right? And I'm part of the problem.
Isn't that ironic?
It is.
So that's what's happening. And it's happening everywhere. Any city that makes their money, on property tax, which is how Metro is funded in Nashville by and large, you're seeing these, buy and sell, buy and sell, buy and sell. Every major developer in the country has 2 or 3 projects going in Nashville, and they are so excited to get a young brand in there. And they will fluff the living hell out of you. And do the math. Do all the math. And do the math 10 years down the road. Because I know it's not sexy to look at those increased numbers in your CAM, but that's going to be what ends my company is property taxes.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. It's really, gosh, it's so tough when you're someone who cares about food and having a great idea for a concept, and doing something special with that. And the thing that's going to sink you is something just as it's basically like C-SPAN, like property taxes.
Completely out of my control.
Nothing could be more, unsexy about what could sink your business. But those are the things you do have
They're
to pay
real.
attention to if you want to keep living the dream of being, a restaurateur. You have to get that stuff solid. And I think that that's really helpful because you get a lot of people with the stars in their eyes and, they see the biggest, and you want them to help them avoid kind of how you felt, previously. And that's really helpful.
I think regardless of being in a boom town or not, like if you're in a place that's experiencing a boom, just know that it's eventually going to cost 3 times as much. And that is reality.
So you should plan for that.
Yeah, just you're going to have to plan for it. And I am an open book. If anyone is listening to this podcast and you want to open a ramen shop, I will send you a pro forma and a P&L. You can see it. But my advice to any restaurateur, anybody, whether you're on the creative side or the business side, if you say to me, you need to be able to tell me what your food costs are and what your profit margin is after 3 martinis. If you can't do that, you have no business getting into this business.
That's great advice. Sarah, the last thing we do is we try to leave folks with resources. And would you be able to share 3 books, 3 podcasts, 3 things that have kind of helped you in your journey that they can go look up?
This one's kind of an odd one. It's a little bit old, this book, but I think it still really, really sinks in. It's not a business book. It's called The Long Tail, Tail. And it was written by a guy who at the time I think he was the editor of Wired magazine. And he defined what was happening in culture was that it used to be media was all here. And then once brick and mortar came out and digital came in, it went like this, right? We were buying more of less. So I think for me, understanding customer pattern behavior was really important for me because I had just been a customer before. I had never really studied customer behavior. I think that really helped me a lot. I'm not really a person who will have specific resources, but the advice that I would give is take every demo you can on every piece of technology that you can. My team definitely gets pissy with me when I change things up. And at the pace that things are changing now, if you don't carve out time in your week to understand what's coming down the pike will come to you.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really have always invested time into the future. And I think that that's really important because it's helped me to understand what's about to happen. And if you are stuck right here, you're going to get into a cash flow issue. You're going to get into trouble. And then you're going to get into the predatory loans and it's a downhill from there.
Mm.
So I think the advice that I really try to give is find yourself a mentor, not a consultant. Find a mentor, find someone who will be honest with you. There's no money exchange. I will show you a P&L. I will show you how to read that P&L, but you have to do the work and you have to know what those numbers are and you have to build a budget and you have to stick to that budget. So I think honestly, if I was to do it all over again, I should probably go take an accounting course.
Okay. I mean, that's actually really good advice because you're going to have to be a business owner and accounting is really important in business.
There's no amount of unreasonable hospitality that can get you past that.
Oh, man, that's really good. Do you have any other recommendations for us?
Let's see. I think rather than leaning on business books, go back to some MFK Fisher. Go back to that. Like, I think what we need these next founders to do is to recapture community in a way that we didn't have to, because community was not as stark as it is now. You know, new founders have very different mountains to climb than I did.
Oh, that's really good. I think that's where we leave it. That's really good, helpful stuff. Sarah, this has been an incredibly valuable hour for me, and I believe for all of the small operators that are listening right now, even the big ones who are the problems you've described are it doesn't really matter the size of your business. You probably run into some of these tenants, and I really appreciate your vulnerability, your openness, and I'm grateful for your time coming on here and sharing your experience. Really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, and if anybody wants that pro forma, just DM me. I'm always around. I'm completely an open book.
Awesome. Sarah Gavigan, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Restaurant Reset is sponsored by Genius for Restaurants, the modern point-of-sale system from Global Payments. Genius helps you reach your most important goals, whether that's simplifying your operations, speeding up your checkouts and table turns, easily expanding into new locations, or building loyalty with guests. To find out more, visit globalpayments.com/genius.